So just an overview of what I'm going to cover then. Quite a few of you asked about platforms. Should you be just using PubMed, or are there other platforms that you should be considering? A lot of the questions were around the process of the literature review itself. So, like a walkthrough of what it might look like, what kind of procedure you might go through, the difference between primary and secondary sources, and tertiary sources as well, if you need to find those, and then how to organize all the information, including the tables and the figures, and how to know when you've gathered enough information as well. And then some other questions we had around referencing, referencing software that you might want to use, how to automatically link references within an article to a piece that you're writing. And then someone else asked about plagiarism as well, how to avoid unintended plagiarism, which is more kind of aligned to the writing side of things, but we can touch on that as well. And then realistic timelines around planning the literature review, kind of knowing how long to expect that to take. So those are the areas we're going to cover. I'm going to jump in and start sharing my screen. Um, so in terms of databases, I personally use PubMed all the time, and there are a few reasons for that. One is, well, the main one is that when I'm conducting a literature review, I really want to keep track of what I have searched for and what I've found as I'm going, because otherwise you can end up going round and round in circles and seeing the same things over and over again, which is it can get really overwhelming and confusing. So I personally will stick to PubMed, and I'll kind of document on the side what my search terms have been, so that I can kind of track which ones are working, which ones aren't, and kind of build on them as a starting point. And I'll show you kind of what that might look like in a minute. Um, I would say that if you're writing a manuscript for a journal, often when you need to write your methodology, if you're writing a review paper and it involves conducting a literature review for like a meta-analysis, then you might want to use several databases for that. And I would say to ask the client, or to ask the company who's hiring you, which databases they want you to use, what they think is sufficient. But in terms of, you just have a project and you've been asked to find papers to support your work, I would say stick with PubMed. It's less confusing. There's an integration with the software, the referencing software that I use as well, which I find really helpful. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. Obviously, if there are other things that are not in PubMed that you want to be searching for, like some of you asked about secondary sources and tertiary sources as well, like guidelines and compendiums, you can definitely pull those into the referencing software as well. They wouldn't come from PubMed, but they would come from whichever website you were on. It might be a PDF, it might be a website, some kind of document, and you can kind of enter that into your referencing software to indicate what type of material it is, and have it in the same database that you're building for that project. So I'll kind of show you an example of one of those as well if we have time. Um, I haven't done any preparation in the sense that I want to approach this as if it's a brand new project and I haven't done anything on it yet. So the basic premise of the scenario that I'm going to go with is that you've been asked to write an article for pharmacists about cluster headaches. I don't know anything about cluster headaches, and that might be the case if you're starting a project where you don't really know the therapeutic area. And that's the whole point of the literature review. It needs to be thorough, and it needs to give you all the relevant information so that you can learn about that area and you can write about it effectively. So, I think the first thing that I would personally do would be to go to Google and to try to look for some of the keywords around cluster headaches, just to make sure that my search is going to kind of get me all the right kinds of materials. So, I mean, cluster headache is obviously the main phrase that we want to be looking for, but you want to make sure that there aren't any other ways of saying the same thing, so that your search can be a bit more thorough. So, I would have thought maybe migraines would be one. This particular example scenario is you're writing for pharmacists to support the patients who are coming in with cluster headaches, to talk around their treatment or to support them. So, they might say migraine, they might say headache, they might say cluster headache. They might not know what cluster headaches are, but they will definitely say pain, maybe, yeah, maybe eye or forehead pain or something. Um, it really helps to just have like an overview. I think honestly, in this case, I think headache, cluster headache, and maybe migraine would be the main ones that I would look for in terms of the therapeutic area, or even maybe tension headache. Because things like the Mayo Clinic, they're going to be giving you the patient-friendly terms. Obviously, you have something like immunology where it's going to be incredibly scientific. You're going to want to um, know the scientific terminology around that a little bit first so that you can get the right search terms. But because this is focused around like patient support, then we really want to be using search terms that the patient would understand. So typically what I would start with is I would go to the advanced field. Maybe I can minimize you guys up here. So what I typically do is I go to the title and abstract filter, because I want to search in the title and search in the abstract of the paper rather than the whole paper or all of these other things. Honestly, I've never had to use any of these things before. So what I would do is put in quotation marks the main few synonyms or phrases around what it is that I'm looking for. So in this case, I'm going to be starting off with cluster headache. And whenever you have a few similar terms that are trying to describe the same thing, you'd put them all in one line. You would put them in quotation marks if there's more than one word, and you would put an or next to them. So here I would say migraine, or there was another one that I saw. You might put headache as well, just on its own. What else? I think those are the main ones. Obviously, like if it was something like diabetes, for example, you'd have to put type 2 diabetes and then diabetes mellitus, or, whatever, however many you can think of that kind of capture that element of the search. And then I would click add here. And then there's usually a second or even a third element to a search. So in this example, we're writing for pharmacists and we're writing about patients. So I think, we need a kind of another string of terms around that aspect of the search. So I think in this case, I would try pharmacists or pharmacy or patient support, or patient understanding. See, actually, now that I'm writing it out, I can see that there's two different things going on here. There's the pharmacy part of it, and then there's the patient part of it. So whenever there's two different things, you want to have a different row. So I'm actually going to just take these ones out and stick with this pharmacy line here, add those, and then I'm going to have a third row of patient support, patient understanding, patient comprehension, or patient experience. And this is really just a starting point to kind of see what you end up getting. So what I would usually do is then take this box here and kind of have a notes tab on the side, and just keep track of what it is that I've been looking for, and then how many results I get. So I kind of keep this down here just for my own reference. So if I click search now to see what I'm coming back with, I'm getting nothing. So this is a good example. So it basically means that the search is too specific. So now you're going to want to go back and think, okay, how can I make this a bit less specific so that I actually get some results? And you want to kind of keep reiterating this initial search until you get, maybe a couple of hundred papers, or somewhere between like 20 and 50 is kind of ideal. Um, Depending on how big of a search you're doing, and how many years back you want to go. So let's try again. So if we go with title abstract, we definitely want to have the pharmacist or pharmacy part of it. I don't think that we can really cut back on that bit. We do want to have cluster headaches and probably migraine as well. But maybe all those extra terms that we added are not as relevant. And then maybe we'll just put the word patient in there as well and see what happens there. So then I kind of, I might put equals 0 results here for my reference, and then see, okay, how many do I get for this one? So, okay, 49 results. So that's a pretty good number. Like I said, 20 to 50 is kind of ideal if you have a very specific topic. You might, if you end up with like 200, 300, you might want to kind of narrow down the dates a little bit over here. But this is a pretty good number. So when I get to this point, I'm gonna kind of track how many results I get over here. Personally, what I like to do is I will open up my referencing software. So I use Zotero. This is actually a free software that anyone can make an account for, and I personally find it really intuitive, really easy to use. Um, I haven't used it for anything recently, so everything's kind of cleared. But basically, what you do is once you've made an account on the Zotero website and you've installed it, there's a plugin that you can put in your browser that will kind of link it with PubMed. I'm not going to go through that side of things today because it's fairly intuitive, and I'm sure that you can kind of manage that part of it. But I want to show you more the literature review side of things. So what I would do is I would start a cluster headaches folder in Zotero. And whatever the most recent folder that you've been in is where the papers are going to start being pulled in. So all you need to do is just have it open in the background somewhere. And then I'd start opening up some of these papers in a new tab and see, you can tell from the titles if you think they're going to be more helpful. This one is integrating migraine treatments, so that looks pretty useful. This one's more about cost, so I don't think that's as relevant. This one sounds amazing. It's like exactly what I was looking for. Improving care among migraine patients in a commercially insured population. Potentially, and that's 2020. So I'd open up a few of them, have a look, and basically just make sure that I'm getting the right type of paper that I want. Um, Often you'll see the abstract first, so you can kind of have a look. What were the conclusions? What did they find? Um, and then all you need to do is just go up to this little tab here where you see this little sheet of paper, and you literally just click on that, and it will automatically pull everything into your Zotero. And you can see that it tried to get the PDF here. Often, if the PDF is available for free online, it will just pull the PDF in and it will pull everything in automatically, which is ideal. So then when you go into Zotero, you can see this first paper here. It will have the title here and the author, and it will actually pull in all the pertinent information here. It knows that it's a journal article, it has the title, author, page numbers, date, all of that stuff. So then if you click here, you can actually see this is the full text paper that it has pulled in. What I tend to do at this stage is I right click on that and I choose rename file from parent metadata, which basically renames that to the author and the date of the person who wrote the paper. By the way, I'm going to pause for questions shortly. If you have any, I'm just kind of reaching a milestone before I do that. So then you can double click on the PDF from within Zotero, and you can open up the full paper and you can read it. And so typically what I will do is kind of finish the search portion of the lit review before I kind of move on, but I'll show you what you're able to do once everything is in here a bit later. So let me just pull in a few of these other papers. I think this one would be really useful. So again, I'm just going to click up here and it's going to pull everything in. And in this case, it didn't have the full version of the paper. So you may already have access to journals where you can get the full versions of papers if you're working for an institution, an academic institution, or if your employer provides logins for things like that. So you can also request, you can have the links and the names and like request that you get them from a client or from the company that you work for. You might be able to find it online somewhere, or obviously you can just like go to the full text links over here and you can find out where it actually comes from and you can buy it, or you can, use your login to download it from here. For the purposes of this session, I'm not going to do that, but just so you know, if you find a PDF from somewhere else, like if you were to get access to that, you would just drag it on top of this thing here and it would just show underneath, just like this one does. So when you drag it in, it automatically like pulls, whatever, like it's already pulled everything in from PubMed anyway. But when you add that PDF, it will know that like those are connected and it will rename that PDF so you can kind of have them all in one place. So I'm just going to pull in a few more of these just for an example. But I'm just wondering, do you have any questions about the searching portion of what I did? Because honestly, it doesn't usually happen this quickly where I get the exact number of results that I was hoping for. So I don't know if you have any scenarios that you've come across where you've been struggling with like the number of results that you're getting, or you're not finding what it is that you want. Does anyone, let me just stop sharing for a moment. There's a little reactions button at the bottom of Zoom. If you click on that and you do the raise hand button, then Dustin and I can see if you want to speak, or you can just type into the chat if you have any questions at this point. Anything coming in? I just realized I can see the chat as well. Yeah, really likes the tarot. Impact factor. That's a good question, Jack. You know what? I never take that into account. I know that when I was studying, when I was training and learning how to do literature reviews, it was told to me that it was really important, but I personally don't factor that in at all. I believe you can kind of filter according to that if you want to, but I never do that. Okay, so no questions so far?
Oh, sorry. Just to follow up a little bit.
Yeah.
So but personally you haven't done it, but is there ever a client that requires you to screen literature based on impact factor ever?
I have never come across that scenario. I don't know if anybody else in the group has.
Okay.
Maybe share, but no, personally, I've never seen it to be a criteria. It's never been something that I've been asked to consider.
Okay. Thank you.
No worries. So I'll get back to showing you how I do things. Okay, so let's say that I have a few papers now gathered. I mean, obviously, I'm going to end up with maybe 15, 20, or even like 50 or 100, depending on the size of the project that I'm working on and how many sections there are going to be. what I usually do, and I'm just going to do this metadata thing here. Let me see if I'm oh, you know what? I might include like another source as well, just so that you can see what that looks like. So let's say that I want to use this Mayo Clinic website as a source. Mayo Clinic is accepted by a lot of my clients, depending on the level, how extensive they want the referencing to be. But this is a pretty good example. So usually what I would do is, again, like now it's kind of, it looks a bit different, but it will still pull everything in. Um, it does this snapshot thing. I'm not really sure what that means. I think it just kind of takes the URL. I think it's supposed to take like a screenshot of the page, but usually what I do is I go to print the page, but I save it as a PDF, and I'll just kind of save it on my desktop or somewhere. Let's just put it there. And then when I go into Zotero, so here it is, it's pulled it in. It knows that it's a web page and it has the title, but it doesn't have the author information. It doesn't realize that the Mayo Clinic is the author. Maybe there's another author that we can pull in, but it does have the URL. It has the date that we accessed it, which is the most important. So what I'm going to do is just drag this PDF that I just made and put it over here. And then, like I said, it renames the PDF and it kind of keeps everything organized. So what you can do is you might want to fill in some more of this data here if you feel that it hasn't accurately captured everything. I've never known it to not capture everything when it's a journal article, but if it's a web page, it might have missed some information. So sometimes with a web page, there'll be another author that you want to, include, but I don't see anything here. It just says Mayo Clinic staff. So what I would probably do is just put Mayo Clinic as the author. Um, Given that it's like a company name, I would just put it as a last name, but obviously you would put a first name and a surname. And then if you had other authors, you would just click this plus button until you put them all in. But even if you have a PDF version of a paper and you're dragging it into Zotero, it will pull all the information from that PDF. So you'll rarely have to do any of this yourself. And this saves a lot of time when it comes to literature reviews. And that's why I think the referencing software is so important. But, we have the website title, we have cluster headache symptoms and causes. Sometimes it can get the titles a bit wrong. I mean, honestly, it's just cluster headache, so I'm gonna get rid of that last bit there. And it's important to make sure that all of this is correct, because when you come to use these in your paper, it's going to be pulling everything in. So you want to make sure that that's correct. So that's how it works with a website. It's the same kind of thing with any kind of PDF. You would just drag it in. You would just input the information manually here, and you would just choose like a document. That's a pretty common one. I don't know, maybe newspaper article or presentation. It just kind of changes which fields it gives you, but it's pretty much the same. So that's what I would do in terms of the search. And then personally, what I do if I'm starting to kind of plan out my piece is I just make notes over here as to what I want to include. So let's say, I tend to start with the most useful paper. I think it would have been this one, but we don't actually have access to this one. So let's go with this position statement. So looking at this source, I probably want to skim read it and try to figure out kind of what is going to be useful for me in my piece. So maybe we've got some background information here. Let's see, preventative treatment. So maybe I want to have a section in my article where I talk about preventative treatment. I'm just going to highlight this bit, which I think would be useful. this looks like it might be useful too, because it's pointing me towards some guidelines that I might want to look at. I think this whole kind of section would be really useful for this article. So what I personally do, because you can end up with a lot of different papers, is I will just put like American Headache Society, and then I'll kind of put like preventative treatment goals of prevention. And then I'll kind of list what applies to that underneath. So then every time you do like highlights in here, like maybe you want to use this table, how to identify patients for preventative treatment. That looks like it would be useful. You can just kind of go through and highlight whatever it is that you want to use. And then if you save that, then when you close it, it's still going to remember all of your annotations. So you can obviously write on here, you can make notes, whatever you want to do, and it will all stay in here. Then I might have a look at this other paper. So this is like about insurance, commercially insured population. I guess insurance would be very relevant for pharmacists because they have to deal with that a lot. So then I might just note down here, I don't know how to pronounce that person's name, but I might just put the author and the date there. So this is kind of the approach that I take when I tend to start with the papers that I feel cover the most ground in terms of the content that I'm trying to write about. So this is a very high level, but if I found a really useful review paper or something from 2020, like maybe this insurance one is like really, really useful. I'll actually pull a lot of content out from those few studies, and I'll basically form like almost an outline of the piece just using those few pivotal studies that I think are really great. And then I'll go through on a high level and look at the other studies and kind of slot those into that outline, if that makes sense. So this one is talking about quality of life and like there's a lot of statistics in there and things like that. So is everything making sense so far? Does anyone have a question or a comment? Yeah, I'm going to answer Lakshmi's comment as well. Yeah, so I find that obviously it depends on the size of the paper that you're writing or the piece that you're being asked to do. You should have been given a sample of the type of paper that you're writing or the piece. So if it's going to be like 20 pages long and there's going to be 100 references, you're going to want to make sure that your search is bringing you at least like 500, 600, because you're going to have to go through all of them and pull in the ones that are relevant, and every other one might not have anything to do with what you're trying to write about. I'll get to your question in a minute as well, Alexis. But if you're writing just a blog post, for example, like 500 words, 1,000 words, and you're only going to need like 2 or 3 references or 5 references, you want to have less results coming back, because you want to get really, really high quality, really focused papers, like review papers or meta-analyses that are kind of giving you everything you need almost in 1 or 2 papers. And then you can supplement that if you have specific statistics that you want to include and things like that. So it depends on the size of the piece that you're writing, and it depends on how many references you think you're going to ultimately be reading. If your search is bringing back thousands of results, it's not specific enough. You need to go back and you need to tweak the criteria and make sure that you're getting more specific so that you end up with less results, or less specific so that you end up with more results. That process is so important. You have to make sure that you put the work in the beginning to get the right number of results. Then it's just a matter of going through every page looking at the abstracts and saving all of the ones that you think are useful. What you don't want to be doing is searching over and over and over again. Like, you don't want to be actually changing your search terms and searching in different ways all the time, because then you're going to end up seeing the same papers over and over again, and you're going to get confused, and it's just not going to be efficient. So that's my advice there. Um, and to answer Alexa's question, yeah, I personally highlight the articles after I've brought them into Zotero. So I use the highlighting function or the annotation. You can type on them, whatever you want to do. Um, I highlight on there because then everything is being saved within it. And that's really helpful because when you're going back to the client and you're submitting the project, at that point, you can just kind of copy those PDFs and pull them all together and send them out with the annotations. Often the clients want to see where the content is coming from. And you can always if you want to have clean versions, you can just kind of duplicate them and do the annotations somewhere else. But I find more often than not, it helps me to have them all saved in there. Um, any other questions so far? How recent does literature usually have to be? If you have a review from 2020 with lots of information, how do you ensure all the information from that article is still up to date in 2021? Yeah, that's a great question, Jack. I would say it depends on the client. It depends on the person who's assigning you the project, if they have a preference on that. Um, I would say 5 years is pretty standard in terms of what is considered to be appropriate. Um, some people will specify a certain time frame that they think is acceptable. Sometimes the project is more of an update where you're conducting a literature review to see if there are any new research, so anything that's come in the last 12 months, for example, to update an existing piece. So you're replacing maybe the 2015 2016 references with the 2020 2021. You're definitely going to see a lot of published research from 2021, even though it's only March, because it's happening all the time. I personally don't limit by years to begin with, but then if I end up with twice as many results as I want, I might just narrow down the timeline a little bit to give me an appropriate number. Um, it varies, but I would say that's something to ask the person who's commissioning you for the project. In Yeah, if that makes sense. No worries. So I think I've covered kind of how to pull the papers in, and then how you can, I'll start sharing again, how to kind of organize them. So really, you want to have like your main review papers that you're basing things on, pull as much as you can from those, get your organized kind of list of topics over here, and just note down the author and the date so that you know where those things came from. And then, when you're structuring the piece, you can go by that outline, and then you can start to look at the specific references and write what you need to write in the document. So tables and figures, um, I guess it's the same as written text that you want to use. You would just annotate on the PDF. You might want to take a screenshot of it from the paper and kind of paste it over here into your notes, just to kind of remind you, like, I want to cover this, I want to cover that. That can be quite efficient. And then somebody asked how to know when you're done. I think we've kind of covered that in the sense that you tend to know going in how many references you're expecting to acquire. Um, you want to base that on the length of the project and how extensive the referencing needs to be, rather than like the search process, if that makes sense. It's going to be different with every project. You need to when you're looking at these papers, and that's why I suggest going with the review papers first, because you're learning about that therapeutic area and that topic while you're reading it all. So then when you go to the other papers that are maybe less relevant or more nuanced or harder to read, then you're just plugging in little bits of detail here and there that is kind of supplementing the overall piece. So then if we move on to the referencing side of things, so let's just have a look at a Word document and kind of see how this might come together. So I want to make sure we have some time for questions as well. So if you have Zotero, and I think this works for EndNote and other referencing software as well, you can actually and I can't remember how I did this now, it's been a while, but you can add it to Microsoft Word. I'm sure if you Google it, it will tell you how to do that. But it gives you this Zotero tab up here, which is really helpful because everything is integrated. So let's say, you know, you have your title here, you have your first sentence, second sentence here, and third sentence, and then you have your references list down here. So you can you know, write your piece however you want to. I typically start writing based on my outline. Like I'll pull in some of the things that I've learned from the papers and just kind of start putting the structure together, start putting the main points in that I want, maybe putting some subheadings in there. Um, and then when I come to actually wanting to write things out properly, I'll be looking at the PDF and I'll be kind of pulling in the highlighted bits and using them wherever I want to use them. And then when I want to add a reference, I just click on add citation. And here you can choose the style of the citation that you want. I typically choose AMA because I find that's the most common that I get asked to use, but there are a lot of different versions here. And you can actually manage styles and kind of import different styles if you want to. I've never really been needed to do that. I typically stick with AMA. Automatically update citations. I always have that turned on because I find it really, really helpful. Um, so then I click OK. So basically, it brings up this little search bar whenever you're adding something. And I will then search for either the author or a keyword from the title that I know is there. So this is when the notes come in really handy because say that I'm looking for this American Headache Society thing. I'm like, oh, I'm writing about preventative treatment and I know that this comes from this paper. Then I can just start typing American and then it brings it up as a suggestion here. So I can just click on that and I can add multiple references here. So let's say that I'm referencing the Mayo Clinic as well. I can start searching for cluster headache or Mayo Clinic, and it will come up here. And then when I'm done, I can just press enter or return, and it will add the superscript numbers there. And that's what the AMA style looks like. If you choose one of the other styles, obviously it might show as author, date, or some variation of that. So you can basically, you know, write any part of the article that you want, and you can add your references in wherever you need to. And the cool thing about using this, obviously, you don't have to type anything out manually. You're less likely to make mistakes, but if you have, like, let's say we have the American reference over here as well, it knows that that's the same as the one that you used earlier. So the numbers will be consistent throughout the entire piece, and it's really, really useful. And then you can have your reference list here. So you just click add bibliography. And sometimes you have to do it twice, but there we go. So these are the two that I've used, and it's pulled in everything by itself. So it has a standardization of how it presents the information, and it has the numbers as well that match up to these numbers. So let's say that we now want to add in this what was the one we didn't use? This, the one that I can't pronounce. Let's say that we wanted to put that over, well, let's say I now want to add a new section over here, new section over here. And then I want to add that reference. So I'm talking about insurance. I click add citation. I search for the author's name and I click on that. So now this one becomes number 1 because I'm using it first. This is now 2 and this is now 3. And you can see that the bibliography automatically updates as well. So number 1 is now this one. And then we have American Headache Society and Mayo Clinic after that. So when you're using, anything more than 2 or 3 references, it's really, really efficient to have this integration and having already in your notes, knowing where everything comes from, it just makes it so much easier. And then, yeah, it's just a regular Word document. So you can save that and send that to a client and it will look exactly like you typed it all out manually, but you didn't have to. So it saves a ton of time. It's really, really useful. And of course, it means that you don't have to reference every single paper that you find. Say you end up pulling in like 50, 60 papers, and then you're going through them all and you realize like 20 of them are really, really helpful, but the other 40, they don't really add anything or you're not really going to use them. You don't have to. It doesn't affect anything. You would just go by your notes and you would pull things in and then you would decide, okay, I'm just going to add whatever it is that I use. And then this list is just going to have the ones that I use. So then the final step would just be to, when you finish the piece, basically just save the PDFs of the ones that you actually used out of Zotero and then zip that up and send that off to the client. So does anyone have any questions about the referencing side of things, or anything else that we have covered?
I don't have a question. I do have a comment as somebody who's used Zotero a fair bit. And that
Mhm.
is, if the client decides that the way they want to get, if they're doing a manuscript and the client indicates that they want revisions and they start typing, and if they move sections around, that completely messes with your referencing, and you need to replicate the changes in your own original file.
Yeah.
Am I being clear about that? I'm not sure I'm explaining it that clearly.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I've had that same experience. So what I usually do is I send the copy deck or the draft to the client and I say, if you need any revisions, add comments to this version and don't change the referencing yourself. So then if they add comments, I can just take that version and I can do what I need to do. And Zotero just updates everything as it did before with my version. It only gets messed up if they actually change the superscript numbers and they change the references. So that's one way of doing it. Another way is to have your original document alongside their edited document. Hopefully they have track changes so you can see what they've actually done, and then have a new version of your own document so that everything is synced up accordingly. And Alexis was just sharing that you get a certain amount of free storage space. um, I I don't know how it works exactly, but I never filled mine up. I used to use it a lot more than I do now. I don't do much writing now because I have writers who do it for me. But yeah, you can basically use it for free, and then you just have to kind of clear out, empty the folders when you're done with a project, so that you can make more space, or you can just pay the subscription. Um, but yeah, it's a really great software. I've tried using others myself, and I don't like them as much as this one. And I find it saves me a ton of time, and the client never knows how quick it is. A lot of people still do it manually, and I would never do that now that I know how to do it automatically.
Yeah.
So are there any questions? I think I've covered kind of all of the basics. Um, I guess just the last comment that we had about timelines. Um, Honestly, I think if you're following a really efficient process like the one I've just outlined, it doesn't take that long because you're not getting caught up in all the detail of like reading all the papers, and you're not having like a million tabs open all the time. I typically, as long as you put that time into the initial search and you're getting a good number, it's just a matter of going through one page at a time, another page, having those open, saving them if they're useful, and then closing the tab, and just closing the tab if it's not useful. So you're not having like hundreds of tabs open. You're just like, okay, I'm pulling this. No, I don't want that. So it doesn't take that long to do it. I think it really depends on how much reading time you then want to do. Like, how thoroughly do you want to review them? Um, I've gotten really good at writing based on my own outline and kind of supplementing it with the references as I go. I think it's a really good skill to practice to do like a high level, using the abstract and just your highlighted bits that you think, okay, this is helpful over here. And then you can add more detail as you go, um, because otherwise you just get bogged down in all of the data, and it just, it can be really overwhelming. And then I guess the plagiarism question that we had, I think again that the process that I use, it doesn't really allow for plagiarism, because even if you were copying and pasting bits from the PDFs and putting them in your notes, if you're using those notes to then inform the structure of the piece, you're not going to be word for word using those phrases. You're going to, as you organize everything, you're going to be naturally wanting to introduce the flow and the narrative flow to the piece. So personally, I actually type my notes out rather than like pasting them in, just to make sure that I'm not going to be copying any of the specific language. But if you have a PDF that you're looking at and you're writing, just be cognizant that you don't want to be taking whole sentences or paragraphs. You can kind of get the essence of the piece across in your own words. Yeah, it's just to the question about Viva Vault. When you're working with a pharma company and they'll ask you for the references that you use to support the piece that you've written, um, then you would provide all of those references. You would have your annotations on the references themselves, that might be a bit more specific. So say you've highlighted a specific sentence that you've used and it corresponds to the document. You might want to, instead of having AMA, you might want to have a referencing style that has a bit more information, like the author and the date, and then you can add like the page number of where that came from. You might also be asked to add a letter, like the first time you use something from that reference, it could be A, and then the second time you use something could be B, so that the person who's reviewing it can easily see where that information has come from. And that's something that could be asked of you often. Um, so yeah, you can just kind of incorporate that by choosing a different style of referencing in Word via Zotero.
Oh, hi. Sorry. Actually, do have one more question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was wondering, like, if you, when you're doing literature search, have you ever have to deal with sources indicating conflicting information? For example, particular therapeutic method was recommended for this condition, but another source indicate otherwise. How do you rank one source over another?
That's a good question. I wish that came up earlier. Um, I think what I tend to do, and this is why I have the high level check-in of the abstract to see what the papers are showing. When I'm organizing the points that I want to make, if I see that there's conflicting information and like some papers are saying one thing and some papers are saying something else, it helps me as I'm creating that structure that I need to provide the contrasting opinions. So I might say, like, the consensus is this, and then, support those points, and then have a contrasting paragraph saying, but, some people might say this. So, I might eliminate certain sources that I think are not high enough quality, or that are not supportive of what it is that I'm trying to teach. Um, but yeah, it's tricky because you obviously want to be accurately representing what is out there. But if you're leaning towards only documenting certain things, then you might just want to exclude some of it as well. I would say you'd have to talk to the person who assigned you the project as well, just to see if they're open to having more of a balance, or if they want to only stay focused on a certain type of evidence. Some people can get away with being more biased than others.
Okay, yeah, that sounds great. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. If we don't have any final questions, I just would like to say thank you for everyone joining us. Dustin's going to put a link in the chat. This is a free event. We just wanted to ask if anyone wants to make a voluntary donation. You're more than welcome to do that. We don't expect anything, but it would be nice to have some support. So that will be coming in the chat from Dustin. We also have a mailing list. We do these events pretty often, typically about once a month, every 6 weeks or so, different topics every time. If you want to be kept up to date on upcoming events that we have, you can join that email list. We only send out, one email a month, just whenever we have an event coming up. We're not going to spam you with anything. And yeah, just so you know where to find us if you're interested in learning more about Prospology or what we do. We work explicitly with medical writers. Many of them are new to the field. They are looking for full-time work or for freelance clients. So we help them build up a portfolio, website, writing samples. We help them navigate all the negotiations of projects, how to know what to charge, the financial side of things, how to deliver different types of projects, all that kind of stuff. So if you're interested in getting some career support in medical writing, you can go to prospology.com, and we have a lot of information over there, including a webinar that's really detailed actually about our story and my story and everything that we do. So yeah, thank you so much to everyone for coming. And yeah, we're very glad to have had you here. Please donate something via PayPal if you can. And if not, that's fine. And hopefully we'll see you guys at one of our future events. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much.
No problem. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Fantastic presentation.
You're welcome.
Thank you. It was fantastic. Will a recording be available?
Good question. We do record for the purposes of our students who are working with us, but we don't actually provide recordings to the attendees, just because, yeah, we do them for free. If we recorded them, then no one would show up live, and we like to have some interactivity there. But hopefully you took lots of notes, and we'll be doing these events more in the future. So yeah, thanks for coming.